You've probably heard of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, right? It's one of the most famous poems of the 20th century and also one of the most difficult. But what if I told you that for 100 years, we might have been missing a massive piece of its story, a hidden trauma encoded right there in its lines that we're only now beginning to see?
Chilling, isn't it? This is one of the poem's most iconic lines. And it's not just talking about some abstract idea of fear. It captures this primal, almost physical dread that gets under your skin, a kind of post-traumatic feeling that speaks not just to the mind, but directly to the body.
Okay, so for about a century, the official story on The Wasteland has been pretty much set in stone. Everyone kind of agrees on what trauma forged this masterpiece. It's the story we've all been taught in school. And here's the standard take. The poem is shattered and fragmented because Europe itself was shattered by World War I. All the talk of corpses, brokenness, and spiritual emptiness, well, that's seen as the literary shrapnel from the trenches, right? A reflection of a continent in total collapse. And honestly, it makes a lot of sense.
But what if that's not the whole story? What if there was another global catastrophe happening at the exact same time, one that killed way more people than the war? A trauma so huge, yet so culturally invisible, that we've just failed to see its shadow looming over every single page of this poem. To really get our heads around this new reading, we have to ask a bigger question first. Why do some historical tragedies get carved into giant stone memorials, while others just seem to vanish? Almost like a fever dream you can't quite remember when you wake up.
Well, think about it. War, for all its horror, it gives us a narrative. You've got heroes, you've got villains, a sense of collective sacrifice. There's a story you can build memorials around. A pandemic, though, that's a whole different beast. It's this intensely personal, isolating battle you fight inside your own body. It's a story about feeling helpless, not heroic.
And that is the absolute key. There's no glory in dying from the flu. There's no grand cause. It's just a tragedy. And this lack of a heroic story is exactly why the 1918 Spanish flu, a pandemic that killed tens of millions, basically became a cultural ghost, almost completely erased from the very history it devastated.
So, if this pandemic was essentially silenced by the culture, how on earth can we find its fingerprints on the poem? Well, we have to put on our detective hats and start digging into the biographical clues of Eliot's own life.
Just look at this timing. It's a perfect storm. The war is ending, but this monster of a pandemic is still raging. And right smack in the middle of it all, T.S. Eliot and his wife Vivian both get sick. So you see, this wasn't some distant news story for him. This trauma was inside his home. It was inside his own body, while he was putting together this epic poem.
And we don't even have to guess. We have proof, straight from the man himself. In his personal letters, Eliot is talking about the pandemic all the time. He's totally aware of this mnemonic influenza that's just overwhelming the world around him.
But it gets even better. He's not just casually mentioning the disease, he is recording its specific physical symptoms. And I want you to notice that phrase, extreme dryness. Just kind of hold on to that thought because it is about to become a huge clue when we look at the poem itself.
Knowing that he had this personal, physical experience, well, it completely reframes the entire poem. It's like we can finally decode its language through this new pandemic lens.
First, we need to talk about this idea of delirium logic. You see, for 100 years, critics have called the poem's bizarre structure modernist fragmentation. But what if it's something more visceral? What if it's a perfect literary snapshot of a fever dream? That chaotic, disjointed, hallucinatory state your mind enters when you're battling a serious illness.
Okay, take a listen to this incredibly visceral line from the poem. I mean, just feel the physicality of those words. A dry, dead mouth that can't even produce saliva. So, with our pandemic lens on, is this just a fancy metaphor for a spiritual drought? Or is it a shockingly accurate description of a major symptom of the 1918 flu, the very same extreme dryness that Eliot himself wrote about in his letters? It's a perfect match.
All right, let's look at another one. This is a famous, desperate cry from the poem's Fire Sermon section.
Now, the traditional reading talks about spiritual suffering or Buddhist philosophy, but what if it's way more literal? What if this is the raw, immediate cry of someone in the grip of a raging fever? It's the physical reality of a body literally on fire with illness, turned into language.
And once you see it this way, you just can't unsee it. Suddenly, everything shifts. The fragmented language, that's the virus's impact on the brain. The constant talk of corpses and bones,
That's not just about soldiers on a faraway battlefield. It's about civilian bodies piling up in cities like London. Those tolling bells, they're not for war heroes. They're for your neighbors dying down the street. It all just clicks into place.
So what does this all mean? How does rereading the poem this way change our understanding, not just of the poem, but of how we actually remember history itself?
Here's the truly mind-bending part. The Wasteland isn't just about the pandemic, it's about the very cultural silence that surrounded it. Think about it. All of its themes of broken communication, the inability to speak, the feeling that you can't connect, that's a perfect reflection of a society that literally could not find the words for this unspeakable trauma.
It's almost as if Eliot became a channel. He ended up giving a voice to this massive collective trauma that was so pervasive yet so hard to talk about, that the culture just tried to forget it. The poem captured the ghost that was haunting everyone.
So, in the end, the poem's famous fragments aren't just the shrapnel of World War I, they are also the residue of a viral apocalypse that shattered bodies, splintered consciousness, and broke the very way memory works. It's a poem built from the wreckage of two global traumas, not just one.
And that leaves us with a really urgent question, doesn't it? As we create the stories and the art and the history of our own pandemic, which parts of the experience will we choose to remember? And maybe more importantly, which parts will we choose to forget?